The Beast from Beyond, the final map in our Infinite Warfare Zombies adventure. A map I consider to be one of the worst in the franchise. From the terrible special enemies, to the lackluster main quest, to one of the worst boss fights of all time, and even a wonder weapon questline that makes me want to pull my hair out. The Beast from Beyond is a terrible zombies experience, and out of the gate, I don't think my thoughts have changed much since my original review. If anything, I found better ways to express said thoughts and better articulate what I believe went wrong and why it doesn't work. So hello there, fellow cryptid slayers! My name is Stanley557. Welcome to the final part of my Infinite Warfare Zombies Rereview, with The Beast from Beyond, and the subsequent reward known as Director's Cut. Now, without further ado, let's finish this. The Beast from Beyond is the fifth and final map in IW Zombies. The experience takes place in the far future on a frozen ice planet overrun by the cryptids, an enemy from COD Ghost Extinction. At the facility, the IW crew must face off against this nostalgic foe and escape one of Willard's deadliest films to finally complete these trials and return home. Now, before we jump into the specifics, let's talk about the team that worked on Extinction, Neversoft. What I'm about to say is going to be quite negative, but I don't want this to be just another attack on the team. My constant up and down review of IW Zombies is meant to be a critical analysis of the game. And despite what I've said, and the criticisms that I've had, this is an amazingly talented team. And for the most part, many of my issues with IW seem to stem mostly from poor decision making, and a weak story that doesn't properly integrate all of its pieces together. And each and every single person that worked on this game should be extremely proud of it. The team at Neversoft are a third-party studio brought in to work on various Call of Duty game modes, with their most famous contribution being Ghost Extinction. This is a similar endeavor undertaken by Ravensoft, who have worked on Shangri-La, Half of Alpha Omega, Togder Toten, and fully developing Exo Zombies, which would explain the game mode's very distinct feel. Extinction, the critically acclaimed game mode, seemed like a perfect fit to continue, but following Black Ops 3's success, it's most likely the team were told to make a zombies mode first and foremost. But that doesn't mean the team clearly weren't trying to integrate the cryptids as much as possible, with the previously fought Krogs essentially being reskinned acidic spewing cryptids, so Beast seemed like a natural conclusion to end things on. Following the completion of their work on Ghost, Neversoft were absorbed into Infinity Ward, and many of the same developers went to go work on 2 IW Zombies, one of which being Lee Ross, the lead writer for Extinction. But with that said, I would like to personally tell the team that making video game experiences is very difficult, and with the resources provided to them, this endeavor must not have been easy. But with that said, let's talk about The Beast from Beyond, often considered one of the worst maps in Zombies history. So, let's ask one last time, what's the story? Coming right off the heels of Attack, the story picks up in an alien spaceship on a direct course for the base on the ice planet below. Amidst our confusion, Poindexter soon comes to the realization that our crew are going to be a part of one of Willard's Extinction films, specifically a remake of the film Nightfall, which makes no sense as the facility shares no architecture or iconography with Nightfall, so I have no idea why this line is set in the intro, besides there being plans to incorporate the look of Nightfall into the map. But whatever happened to those plans fell through. Landing on the ice planet, our crew gear up and get ready, while also somehow knowing this is the last film. Which, hey, I don't know how this information is conveyed to them, because, what if this was film 5 of 500? Get ready, guys, only 495 films to go! The map takes inspiration from various alien and outer space films like Alien and 2001: A Space Odyssey with Neil, with the film being a mashup of the two genres, with the rogue AI needing to be stopped before the aliens take you down with them. The story is easily the most bare bones of the bunch, no monologues by any celebrities, or even a foreword by Willard, and honestly, I feel like the map takes the least advantage of the setting. And what's said is only said to ensure the experience works in the confines of the narrative. Something I immediately noticed was the lack of Willard's presence again. Just like Attack, Willard doesn't exactly say all too much, and in Beast, besides welcoming the player to the experience on round 1, he says basically nothing. This was most likely done, as Willard is a director's cut reward on Spaceland, so much of his voice talent was most likely spent on that, which left very little in the budget for him to make an appearance outside of cutscenes and Spaceland itself. But we'll talk about how the developers split their time and budget when we talk about director's cut. Loading into the map, there's very little indicator what to do and where to go, but to escape, players have to infiltrate the cargo room and eradicate the cryptids inside. So, from the story, let's skip right into talking about the special enemies, specifically the ones that attack you right out of the gate. Taking center stage from the undead for the first time in zombies history, the cryptids are the primary antagonists of the map until players manage to turn on the power, while they will then show up during special rounds and sprinkled in with the enemy midway through the game. The cryptids are light on their feet, deal the same damage the undead deal, and spawn in fast moving packs that can quickly take you down if you aren't properly equipped. The first 3 rounds have players swarmed by cryptids, but to make up for it, they're equipped with the OSA AR rifle. Hey, fun fact, in solo, if you don't have extended mags equipped, you do not have enough ammo to complete the first 3 rounds of the cryptid rush. Which, yeah, that's fun. These rounds are incredibly difficult to complete, and are the exact opposite of the low stakes buildup a normal map entails. This onslaught unfairly assaults players, and with little time to get set up, the best thing to do is to get holed up in a corner and wait for the cryptids to come to you. For the first time player, it's impossible to learn where you need to go to turn on power, and there's hardly any indicator as what to do, especially when you consider the power switch is Neil's head from Spaceland. But what makes this so problematic is how much damage the cryptids do. In Extinction, players are able to take between about 10 to 12 hits before being down by the cryptid scout, without any additional modifiers. But in Beast, players can take 3 hits without any additional modifiers before going down, a drastically different player-enemy interaction loop that values difficulty above all else. The first 3 rounds of the Beast from Beyond are considered some of the worst in the series, and it all has to do with the integration of the cryptids and the lack of care taken to make fighting the enemy fun and satisfying, something accomplished by the team at Neversoft during the development of Extinction and Call of Duty Ghost. Now granted, I know the reason why this was done was to add an increased level of difficulty, especially if you're playing in co-op. Work together, survive together. Makes sense on paper. But in execution, you have an enemy that is far too powerful for the resources the player has access to on round 1. And I don't feel the cryptids do all too much to incentivize player creativity in their setup or approach to the problem, as the problem can only realistically be solved by one method: camping in a corner until the end of round 3, and then build power to prevent the cryptids from spawning in anymore. So every single time you play Beast, you have to do the same setup process over and over again. And unlike a usual zombie setup, I feel there's no unique ways to problem solve. Using different weapons makes the onslaught take longer, as you no longer have enough points to turn on the power, and unless you're playing in Director's Cut, you're required to complete this segment to continue map progression. The idea feels like it was good on paper, but in execution, I don't feel it was properly implemented. What makes the cryptids in Extinction work is a myriad of how different features and systems are all implemented and interweaved into each other. You've got the skill point system, the damage and weaknesses system, the cryptid armor system, the traps, weapons, and buildables all have a unique sense of progression, and the tools you utilize will completely change your experience, giving you a ton of creativity with how you solve the cryptid problem. But in Beast, the most plain and simple problem is the map design and player power. In Beast, the lanes are simply too tight, the arenas are too cramped, and their damage is too high. And if you ask just about anyone, I feel they corroborate a similar story. Except John Rizzo, apparently, because that guy sucks. Move this. I can just move this to the end.
I'm tired of pretending that they are.
I hate those opening rounds. Like, it's the first part. It's the first part in my Beast from Beyond like re-review after the story that I'm like, let's talk about the cryptids. And here's why the first 3 rounds don't work about Beast.
That was what in my review. That's literally the first good thing I had.
That's the first bad thing I have. I hate those rounds. They make me so annoyed. It's to the point where, and due to how difficult Beast's boss fight is, which also features the cryptids, you'll have to complete these rounds over and over again, and the gimmick gets quite old very quickly. And that's my issue. These first few rounds are outright a gimmick, with nothing unique being done to properly utilize the enemies in an interesting way. So let's take a page out of Firebase Z. Why not have the cryptid assault waves happen past round 10, starting with scouts, and then evolving into phantoms, and then the 3rd time onward including rhinos. You can even have players defend supplies for extra bonus rewards like Extinction, give them increased health, or at least give players damage resistance, and set up buildables like the Sentry to give players more creative options that are unlocked by completing these defense waves. Because you have a cool cryptid onslaught the developers wanted, but with proper checks and balances that make it fair and rewarding to complete. You can even make this the method to which players unlock the Venom X, survive an extremely difficult defense wave instead of doing what they actually did. And granted, if they had more time, I feel this is exactly what they wanted to do, but we'll never know. Once power is restored, you'll have access to the whole base in a normal round playing experience. Starting around round 4, the game will go back to playing normally, with the cryptids making a guest appearance by completing specific map requirements like unlocking the bridge to Pack-a-Punch. Now, let's talk about the map layout and aesthetic. The main facility is built like a multi-box arena, and if you ask me, much of it is hardly actually used in combat. This is due to all the special enemies and the way they hardly complement one another in tiny spaces. We'll talk more about the enemy variety later, but on another note, the visuals give the map a sleek look, one massively improved from Attack, but that probably has to do with them utilizing all of the pre-made assets from the campaign. And overall, the Nightfall facility is tiny compared to a usual zombies experience, but the map does extend a bit further with the addition of the theater. In a weird inclusion, our crew can actually escape back into the theater and out onto the streets, but it's heavily implied this is simply another world that Beast connects to, and not the outside world our characters were hoping to return to. A weird movie within a movie kind of deal. What's neat are some of the cool Easter eggs you can find, like the hole where the portal appears in the projector screen is also seen in the Spaceland intro cutscene. There's also posters lining the walls in the theater that have now been filled out with each of Willard's films we've been through throughout the season, which is super cool and a great ludonarrative way to fill out Willard's catalog of films. Also, it's weird there is an Afterlife arcade here, and it's also weird that this is actually the projector room that each map's connected to. Also, is the Afterlife arcade that we go to whenever we go down a different Afterlife arcade, like another world within a world, or I don't know, this is confusing. In any case, theater comes with the various fast travels, and it's a great way to bounce around the map. What's cool is that the film the projector is playing is Beast from Beyond, but if you find the Spaceland film reel and insert it back into the projector room, the film playing now becomes Spaceland, which is a super neat detail and a great way to incorporate the various maps and is a fun callback bringing everything full circle from the intro cutscene of all places. Then there's the gameplay, and sadly for being the final experience, Beast offers players the least amount of things to do. Unlike the extremely creative and well put together Spaceland and Rave, the Beast from Beyond has been stripped of most of what makes IW Zombies IW Zombies. There's hardly any specific buildables, no unique gameplay features like the coin and ticket systems, and when it comes down to it, there's a main quest, a double pap quest, Ghosts and Skulls, and the Venom X. And that's probably the main issue with the gameplay of the map. The only things to do on the map are quest oriented. Now granted, this can be said for a ton of maps created past BO3, and this is an extremely loose definition of what a quest oriented map is. But in Beast, there's no unique mechanics or gimmicks to play around with besides the early round Cryptid Onslaught. But what doesn't work about that is that the gimmick only happens for the first couple of rounds and is required for progression, so you can't actually utilize the gimmick in any meaningful way, or interweave any of the other features of the map, as the onslaught ends when you turn on power. The only real shakeup in gameplay is the enemies themselves, so let's talk about them. Besides the cryptids, players can also encounter the more difficult heavy style enemy, the Phantom, which made its introduction in the original Nightfall. Then there's the clowns from Spaceland, the slasher from Rave, and the ninjas from Shaolin, each of which need no introduction. In an attempt to make Beast feel epic and more than the sum of its parts, each of these enemies spawn into the map as guest characters. What seems like an easy replication of what Revelations did becomes an unending nightmare that wasn't tested. Each of the various enemies requires players to perform different skills to properly route them. The scouts, phantoms, and slasher all require players to continually run away from them, and in the slasher's case, the madman can simply teleport around the map to beat you at your own game. But then there's the ninja zombie, the one factor that goes against this entire philosophy. To counter the ninja zombie, you need to not press the run button, as this action is what allows the ninjas to teleport and chase you down, often teleporting in front of you and dealing 2 to 3 hits of damage, putting you in a lethal position just by existing, making them a top priority. While problematic, this can be remedied in Shaolin by utilizing the chi abilities, the nunchucks, and the katana. But in Beast, there's no easy to access option like that, so now you have a map with contradicting enemy types that require completely different and unreasonable requests from the player. Now I kind of understand why this was done. Beast was developed with the team that made Extinction, and in Extinction's final experience, Exodus, a similar tactic is done with the map featuring every enemy previously encountered, including the scouts, hunters, phantoms, seekers, scorpions, gargoyles, bombers, rhinos, mammoths, and ancestors. It's truly an insane experience, but due to the way the enemies don't overlap in abilities with one another, the gameplay isn't a complete mess, it's just chaotic. but not outright terrible. Exodus allows you to feel overwhelmed in the map's final experience, while using this difficulty and your previous map knowledge to experiment with the right tools to survive. Something Beast horribly implements due to the constraints of the zombies and the way its enemy variety was built from the ground up. And also the health and damage systems and the lack of defensive options. What really helps in Extinction is the use of the armor mechanic, which allows you to take extra hits and not immediately die to the 15 different threats that there are in the game. In IW, and subsequently Beast, there are no systems like that. Why? So you have all these different difficulty and enemy balancing issues in Beast. The Beast from Beyond is a troubled experience, and this isn't helped by how it interacts with various other systems like the Afterlife Arcade. In co-op, this is an issue, but to a lesser extent. In solo, however, the one game mode that for some reason you could never escape going to the Afterlife Arcade for, if you go down, you are forced to go back to the Afterlife Arcade, and upon leaving and returning to the map, you are not granted the safety period usually granted to you from the undead, as special enemies in the map do not follow that rule set. So when you return to the map, for some reason, one of the respawn points is in the theater, and the weapon retrieval box and jug are nowhere near you, so you essentially take a guaranteed game over as you are swarmed by ninjas in the higher rounds, who you can't kill due to not having any weapons, and you can't walk away from them due to also being chased by scouts and phantoms, which require you to run. And do you see what I'm getting at here? It is genuinely frustrating when this happens in a game of Beast, because there's really nothing you can do when it happens. And if I'm being honest, game overs in Beast do slowly go from being frustrating to outright comical, leaving you starstruck as you are constantly placed in a situation where there is nothing more you can do besides lose the game. And there is literally no other map or game in the series that makes me feel that way, besides maybe Exos. Now granted, I've heard being swarmed by special enemies only happens once you're past round 20 and travel through the fast travel portals mid-round. This causes you to be ambushed by special enemies like ninja zombies. Wow, it sure is a good thing the game doesn't respawn you in an area where you'll need to purposely take a teleporter to retrieve your inventory or escape to another part of the map. This is some of the worst design in the series, and it's why a map like Beast can rank so low for so many people. It's such a fundamental issue that affects the post-round 20 gameplay of the experience. And to top it all off, it doesn't help that these special enemies that spawn in during the regular rounds have a health cap that increases with the rounds, whereas normal special enemy rounds, the enemy's health stays stagnant, or at least increases to a minimal degree. And this is ignoring all of the other issues that come from fighting the ninja zombies, which include their teleportation, high health, high damage output, the things that could at least be countered in Shaolin can no longer be countered here. I think I made my point quite clear, but it's arguably the most egregious thing the map does and plagues 50% of the experience because the other 50% is just completing quests. So what tools does the game give you to deal with these enemies? Thankfully, it is something actually useful. The Venom X makes its return from Extinction, and now with powerful ice storms when upgraded, dealing infinite damage to special enemies like the standard undead, scouts, clowns, and ninjas, with enemies like the Phantom dying if they are hit by a direct blast of the weapon. So if this piece of equipment is so useful, surely it can't be that hard to get, as having it would make the experience more fun. You'd want as many people as possible using it and enjoy it, right? To build the Venom X, you'll need to shock a Phantom with Electric Trap, already off to a great start, and solve this algorithmic equation that has a variety solver. Now, you've unlocked access to the Zombie Holding Machine. To unlock the Venom X, once per round, you are given the opportunity to complete a series of maze minigames, using your D-pad to interact with and complete said minigame. But if your little red block even touches an invisible wall that you cannot see, you will fail the step and are forced to try again next round. I feel like I'm insane, like I'm going crazy for saying this is bad game design. Did no one else look at this and think to themselves, let's make this as difficult as possible? What's up? All right, found it. Okay, it's the bottom left one. Red is B5, blue is A6. Thank you. Okay, so
that didn't happen. No one saw that. You had one job, bro. One.
Once you use a solver to complete this step, because there's no realistic way you're figuring this out, you unlock the Venom X. And now, you must listen to Morse code. Once you listen to the Morse code, you must now enter in the Morse code, and then kill a specific number of cryptids based on the number you heard in the Morse code. These enemies must be killed by the ammo-lacking Venom X. Once enough have been killed, you can upgrade the weapon in the Pack-a-Punch machine, because now you've solved the Bridge Troll's riddles, and God has deemed you worthy because none of this makes any sense. Now with the Venom Y, you must listen to the Morse code again, enter in said Morse code again, and now you must kill a variety of special enemies with the Venom Y. Thankfully, this can still be accomplished with the cryptids, although it is much more difficult due to the weapon's limited reserves. Once that's complete, you must activate an actual real-life, no-holds-barred time machine in this map, and summon the green blobs from Attack of the Radioactive Things Ghosts and Skulls quest. Then you must shoot a specific number of these blobs without killing them, while also being speedy and accurate, and of course, if you fail to shoot the blobs, or the step just doesn't activate sometimes, like in my case, you'll have to, say it with me now, burn another round. But let's say you listen to the Morse code, you entered it in, and you didn't take a drill and screw your brain out. God will bestow upon you the ability to upgrade the Venom Y into the Venom Z, a virtually identical weapon that has the same reserve capacity of the X with the infinite damage of the Y. And honestly, yeah, it's pretty amazing. Being the only wonder weapon in IW with a prolonged projectile time, the Venom Z is a perfect offensive and defensive option. Think of it like the Apothicon Servant from Shadows, but it slows down enemies it can't immediately kill with its icy gas cloud. This causes ninjas to teleport into the gas and take increased amounts of damage, instantly kills scouts to standard undead, and overall makes the gameplay more bearable. But unlike in Shaolin, where I feel the issues are remedied by the map features like the chi abilities and easy to acquire wonder weapons, in Beast, there are no mechanics that make the experience easier, and your only counter is locked behind one of the worst quests in the series. Thankfully, in Director's Cut, the weapon can be obtained and upgraded straight out of the box, which is most likely how 99% of players have actually used it. But to conclude, apologies for sounding pedantic, you have multiple instances of Morse code, a step that looks like this, terrible overall framing, and round burners left and right that require absolute precision. And even with the best guides out there, it isn't exactly all too clear what to do. Like, you need to interact with one computer to get one Morse code phrase that indicates the Morse code you need to decipher. Then you'll need to listen and keep track of said Morse code on a second computer until you hear a specific phrase that tells you how many special enemies you need to kill. Then you enter said phrase but slightly altered into a third terminal just to hear a collection sound, which indicates you did it right. And if that wasn't enough, you'll hear a combination of the zombie containment unit counting down and Neil repeating these same two quotes at you. Wow, it's a good thing this step isn't audio sensitive since interacting with the Morse code machine is extremely finicky. Please, please make it make sense. What happened here? What actually happened here? Because when I'm entering in the Morse code, I can't hear the inputs as they're extremely specific and quiet, and Neil is louder than a train going through a tunnel. Thank goodness there are some helpful guides that cut out some of the tedious busy work, but this is easily, without competition, the worst side quest in Zombies. Hey, still with me? Cool. The next quest is the Double Pack-a-Punch quest. To unlock Double Pack-a-Punch, you'll need to complete the first two steps of Ghosts and Skulls to unlock the Entangler. This requires you to grenade open a box, and complete a short lockdown that requires you to stand in one place, and it's also a round burner because, of course it is, why not? And what's that? It gets harder with each time you fail because the undead get more health? Great, sounds good. Usually a step I wouldn't think twice about, especially not one to talk about in the review, but if you're in co-op and anyone gets pushed off, you have to wait till the end of the round to do it again, which is quite irritating when you consider this is Double Pack-a-Punch, a feature more or less required for progression. Usually, I'd omit something like this from the review, but it being a round burner certainly isn't helping things in a map that already has so many. Then you'll need to insert the film reel into the projector, and utilize the trap and entangler to pull a brute head out of the Spaceland film. A step I think is actually super creative, and I would have loved to have seen it incorporated into the quest somehow, but alas, a man can dream. And finally, you place the brute head on top of this cardboard cutout, place the fuses here, charge them, it's done. Pretty cool honestly, right at the end. Now, before we conclude this section, let's talk about the lore on the map, as Beast is one of the few maps to get a backstory. Specifically, lore that interconnects it to Extinction, which we may or may not be covering next. Now, I might add, none of this really matters in the grand scheme of things, but I feel in a continuing disaster, let's stack on arguably the worst aspect, which is how it handles the ending of Extinction. Spoiler warning for those who don't want to hear about this, or they want to wait till I talk about it in the Extinction review, so skip to that timestamp. Recap time! Extinction follows the events of Ghost's campaign, as humanity finds that they are under attack by an alien race, but as it turns out the aliens existed before humanity and the orbital lasers from the campaign woke them up. And now humanity is slowly being taken over by the cryptid race, ready to reclaim the Earth they once roamed. Along the way, they use Samantha Cross, because of course her name's Samantha, as their speaker, with the story flip-flopping between whether or not she's a good guy, with it ending on an ambiguous note whether or not she'll kill the remaining humans on the ship called the Ark. In the game's final experience, Samantha Cross escapes Earth while the cryptids overrun the planet, and humanity is left to wander the stars for a new home. This is a powerful ending as humanity loses a war they could never win, which makes it unforgettable, especially under the umbrella of Call of Duty. Then there's the Beast from Beyond's continuation of said lore. 198 years later, not only did humanity apparently survive, take down the cryptid onslaught, but they also rebuilt an Earth that was basically destroyed and redeveloped space travel. Samantha Cross and her crew, however, were the ones to actually die when they crash landed on the ice planet we're playing on now.
What a twist!
When our new future humans arrive, they extract Samantha's body and reverse engineer the dormant cryptid blood cells to recreate the cryptid race, scouts, phantoms, rhinos, and all. These creatures inevitably break free and overrun the facility, causing the extinction outbreak all over again. And if the security system Neil isn't dealt with, wreckage crews will eventually visit the planet and return the cryptid specimens back to Earth, where the outbreak will eventually repeat itself all over again. Now, I don't know how they're going to repopulate an entire planetary's army's worth, but that's not my problem to figure out. Wow, a world that apparently only exists within the confines of the story within a story? And if you know anything about storytelling, this is a surefire way to get people to care about your narrative. Something I actually like is that 2 of the voices heard in these audio logs are AJ's voice actor doing various impressions, which reminds me of the good old days in Zombies where nearly every character heard in radios were basically voiced by the same 2 people. And there's the things I don't like, which include the absolute butchering of Extinction's lore, turning every Extinction map into a Willard Wyler film, which completely destroys any stakes or tension Extinction originally had, and then there's the outcome of Extinction. Guys, half of you wrote and developed both of these modes. Like, humanity came back from this? What a mess. I don't even have a suggestion like I usually do. The idea would have worked better if you just made a map based on the cryptids and never mentioned any of its ties to the previous work, instead only loosely tying it in a way that doesn't completely retcon the original ending of Extinction. Then there's all those little bugs. I'm specifically bringing up bugs in Beast because this is the one map you're most likely to encounter them, and a good amount of them too. Let's see, you can't sell and rebuy double tap or change choose if you get rid of them in Director's Cut. When you complete the Easter egg without Director's Cut, the map completely breaks. Rounds end early, cryptids have spawn effects but don't actually spawn, Pack-a-Punch is completely inaccessible, and the map seems to break down more and more over time. When you're playing the Mephistopheles boss fight, you can be pushed out of bounds and back into the Beast from Beyond map, where everything is completely broken with very little loaded in. As stated previously, ninjas don't despawn if you use Pack, and ambush you when you exit it. Special enemies don't have the same despawn timer when you respawn. In the Beast boss fight, if you go down with Director's Cut, and you don't immediately grab Quick Revive, you just don't get it back. That's fun. And finally, you can get stuck inside the Mammoth container when in the Beast from Beyond boss fight. I have no words for this one, but that's just funny. And that's the Beast from Beyond. Things may be different someday, so before we go into the main quest, let's talk about all those little things. You know the random turnstile from Shaolin? Well, it actually originates from this map. If you make it to the time travel step in the Venom X quest, you can actually send the turnstile back in time. This turnstile shows up in the dump outside of the theater, and if you activate the time machine, you can send it back to the 1970s using the Entangler. What's funny is that the turnstile can actually also get sent back to attack, where it'll need to be shot before it correctly makes its way backwards, then forwards in time. And what's cute is that when you input the turnstile into the machine during the Shaolin egg, the flavor text for the achievement reads, "The end of a long journey is a single step," with the achievement you get in Beast reading as "message received." This is actually a cool way to tie the maps together without just saying that they're tied together, and a cute reference to how this turnstile just randomly shows up in Shaolin, while also referencing the cycle the IW crew are put under, which is something you'd only know about if you heard a specific quote about the topic on one of the various maps. See, this is the stuff that's cool, and I love this little side egg within a side egg. Then there's Neil, who, as previously stated, does not shut up. He'll mumble something random and finish it off with, "It's the right thing to do." And it happens every 30 seconds, every single time you play this stupid goddamn map. No, this isn't annoying in the slightest. Then there's the ninjas who don't despawn when you pack-a-punch, leading to this happening. Wow, I love this map. The zombie containment unit is a cool feature, and should be something on every map in one way, shape, or form. Let's see, did you also know the slasher can no longer lunge at you with his chainsaw rush and attempt to red screen you? No, instead he one-shots you. Cool! Thankfully, he can be defeated by just about any weapon in a matter of seconds. Are those ninja zombies spawning in, or was that a boy? Was that a slasher? That's a slasher! There's two! No! What else am I missing? The VPR is on the wall. There's no need to use any other weapon on the map when one of the best is basically waiting for you for $12.50, so that completely kills gun variety. Oh right, I completely forgot to talk about the Entangler. As previously stated, you acquire the Entangler by completing the first 2 steps of Ghosts and Skulls. Despite using it across 4 different maps, I only now realize the Entangler is a reskinned Forge Freeze from Spaceland, which is a reskinned Iron Dragon from Campaign Multiplayer. Guess we're playing a fun game of telephone with this thing, huh? In any case, the Entangler is required multiple times throughout the main quest. Then it can also just be used for the Turnstile side quest and is needed to grab the Brute Head for the Double Pap quest. But how does it fare as a wonder weapon? Now having breached the veil between arcade machine and movie reality, the Entangler is just like the Forge Freeze. Terrible. The Entangler can suck the soul out of the undead and utilize it as a terrible weapon that, by golly, it just does nothing most of the time. Launching the souls at undead, the weapon can create small explosions that can deal damage to the enemy, and as I've repeated, is basically useless. It's an option, that's for sure, but one I think is outright just outdone by just about anything else in the player's arsenal. And now that I think about it, probably the reason why we don't have buildables as it takes up the left D-pad slot, but who knows, either it's that or just time constraints. Then there's also the hole by Jug. What does it do? Well, it's a hole. What's its purpose? Being a hole. Is it lethal? Well, it's certainly a hole, so you tell me. Why does the hole lead you to your death instead of just letting you land on solid ground? Because it's a hole. And finally, there's no celebrity character on the map. Instead, the celebrity on the map is Hasselhoff again. At least, not exactly Hasselhoff. Instead, he returns to reprise his role as Neil from Spaceland. This was probably also done because Hasselhoff has new lines when you replay Spaceland post-Mephistopheles, so it makes sense he'd also have some voice work on Beast. Although it's a shame the map has no one to interact with, which would explain its isolated and desolate feel compared to every other map on IW, despite that being what they were going for. Then there's our characters, who say nothing. Like, seriously, they have no reaction to anything besides the round 1 quote and finding Neil. Like, are they just checked out already? Please, take me with you. And despite being a game mode about undead, the map feels completely devoid of life. It's silent, but in the worst way possible. Almost like even the life of the game has left it. And there's nothing more horrifying than a desolate death of something once full of life. So, unlike our usual fares, let's talk about Ghosts and Skulls first, as everything will flow much nicer once we talk about the main quest of Beast later on. Spoiler warning, I actually really like this Ghosts and Skulls quest, and the minigame itself wasn't all too bad, but let's get into it. The first 2 skulls are easy enough as they are required to complete the Easter egg and unlock Double Pack-a-Punch. The third skull is an easy affair which requires you to simply look for 4 symbols and find the odd one out. The fourth skull requires you to follow a specific color of X's around the map. Now, despite the step being a round burner, and it's really easy to mess up, I found it a ton of fun and satisfying to actually complete. The fifth skull is now a standard Ghost and Skull step, and requires you to hunt down 7 tiny queen pieces from around the map in about 10 to 11 locations. Hey, they can't all be winners, I suppose. And complete a blackout sequence on the chessboard using the 8 chess pieces you have. This step is easily the worst and requires you to pretty much look up a guide to complete it. And finally, the last step requires you to find a D-pad code scattered around the map in 3 pieces. You must now head over to the Ghosts and Skulls machine and input the code in front of the machine in another really cool step reminiscent of the Konami code. Probably the best of the Ghosts and Skulls side quests. Many of the steps are short, even if over half of them are basically just round burners if you mess up. And then there's the Skull Breaker machine itself. For the final Ghosts and Skulls romp, Players must color in specific skulls using the various colored cubes. And once enough have been lined up, you can use a nuke to destroy any of that color with indirect contact with one another. This minigame was actually a ton of fun, and there's a lot of leeway with the time given despite there being an insane amount of skulls. But completing it offers you the most balanced of the Ghosts and Skulls quest, and probably the most enjoyable, with the steps being somewhat difficult to learn but easy to remember. And the minigame itself isn't unfair or punishing, instead offering a balanced experience that is easy to master on your first try, and makes me want to actually redo this despite the map being Beast from Beyond, of course. But overall, I agree with the common sentiment that this is easily the best Ghosts and Skulls side quest. Would highly recommend it, especially for how difficult the map's boss fight can be. Speaking of, the Beast from Beyond's main quest, unlike the previous two maps, is actually quite short. Honestly, it's really short. You just need to acquire the Entangler, collect and place an order for floppy disk into Neil, access and send a button back into Beast, which is a cute idea, complete a quick puzzle that requires you to make every horizontal vertical or every vertical horizontal from its original permutation, then deliver Neil to Pap and defeat the cryptids. It might sound long when I describe it like that, but the egg is basically over in 15 minutes. And that's without Director's Cut. The only difficult step being either the Entangler lockdown or delivering Neil in solo, since you can't access the closing doors, which randomly open whenever they feel like it. And if you go into a late round, the undead will begin to sprint while they chase you, which is never fun. But you can cheese it by using the Entangler on a Neil TV, switching weapons, and then switching back to the Entangler. This now allows you to open doors with Neil in tow, and cheese an otherwise stupid step. The entire quest can be completed as soon as you get the full map open, which I appreciate. I'd rather it be short and sweet than whatever happened in Shaolin Attack. But then there's the Beast from Beyond boss fight. If you've seen my recent boss fight ranking video, then much of this will be repeated here, but if you haven't, you really should check it out after this. To complete the Beast from Beyond boss fight, players will have to complete a 6-phase gauntlet that only increases in difficulty with each phase, which I do like, but the threat that builds is the cryptids. And as stated previously, these enemies suck to fight. Now imagine a whole boss fight surrounding them. Okay, so for clarity's sake, I've done this boss fight more times than I care to admit, and the footage you're watching is the fruits of my labor, which makes the fight look easier than it might actually be, so keep that in mind. Phase 1 has players face off against 4 rhinos, one at a time, which is an extremely good way to introduce them to the enemy pool while still making them a threat. Phase 2 reintroduces scouts, Phase 3 reintroduces phantoms and forces you to avoid a laser onslaught, Phase 4 now reintroduces the rhinos, and players must shut down computers with piss-poor interaction detection, probably the most likely place to take it down. Then Phase 5 becomes a 3-minute survival mission that basically forces you to be swarmed by cryptids, and if you get stuck on a corner, you'll die immediately. Let's see, cryptids can also teleport in front of you. If you get off cycle, the rhino will block your path, and no matter how much you get set up to make this victory consistent, there is still a chance the game will just get one up on you because this boss fight is terrible. The step is finished when you interact with a death computer. And finally, there's the mammoth finale. 2 mammoths will appear from a crate on top of the cargo hold, and sport an extremely high health pool, and nearly one-shot you with their abilities in tandem, and produce blue flames that litter the battlefield. If you get hit by a direct attack and run into the flames, it's a guaranteed down. And if you take too long, you'll also be attacked by small amounts of cryptids joining the fight periodically. The main gameplay loop of the fight is to circle the mammoths and get in pot shots whenever you can, and you do this on repeat for about 15 minutes if you're using the VPR. The fight is long, agonizing, and overstates its welcome. But if you use the EBR Bomber and the Ego Trip Fate and Fortune card, both of which require grinding and loot box RNG, the fight is over as quickly as it started. And personally, this is my preferred way to complete the fight. But locking the easiest method behind weekly salvage grinding is stupid. The Beast from Beyond Cryptid fight is the antithesis of a good zombies boss fight, and a ton can be learned by the examples it sets. Bear in mind, my review of this fight is brief, but it truly cannot express how much I hate this final encounter and the way it's designed. Let's see, there's also 2 weapon respawn boxes even though only one of them works, and is in a deadly location, and the enemies don't despawn when you die, so they instantly overrun you when you respawn. But once you defeat the mammoth, after 13 years, you'll have unlocked the first of 3 ending cutscenes.
done it! My goodness, you've finally done it!
Yeah, we've done it all right. But we just got...
Following the defeat of the mammoths, our crew finally escapes and arrive back at the theater, much to Willard's amusement. Almost cheerful that they were able to survive. Obviously pissed off, the IW crew throw him into Spaceland as punishment for the torment they had to go through, while Willard poorly explains why they should let him go, and the dark forces that had a hand in everything that transpired. Basically, pronoun game, pronoun game, pronoun game, and pronoun game. Now, if this were a good story, the narrative would end as the comically evil villain is forced to endure the pain and suffering he inflicted upon others until the end of time, and the game would come to a close. But this isn't a good story, and the cutscenes continue with it being revealed that not only are our characters trapped within the theater, they have now also donned Willard's outfit, as it seems the undead have truly escaped into the real world. And thus the cycle continues anew, with our characters now having access to Director's Cut mode. But before we get into that, let's conclude things on Beast. The map's main quest is short and sweet, and the boss fight is absolutely atrocious, taking the worst aspects of the series and combining it all into one cryptid-filled package, with the fight being reminiscent of Extinction in enemy types alone, with none of the core gameplay features or nuance that make Extinction, Extinction. And unless you're playing a Director's Cut, you are booted back into the map, where Pack-a-Punch doesn't work, rounds end early, and cryptids spawn in and out of reality as the map begins to break down and becomes completely unplayable. And honestly, I think that's kind of poetic. The Beast from Beyond is an absolute mess of a map, if not the worst map in the entirety of Zombies. From a terrible story, gameplay, side quest, and ending, you truly feel like this map is firing on all cylinders in the worst way possible. Beast feels lifeless, budgets feel cut, the enemies topple over one another in contradictory ways that ruin the experience, the only counter is an amazing wonder weapon locked behind the worst quest in the series, and the main quest is short and simple, with a terrible and horrendous boss fight. But in a surprising turn of events, Ghosts and Skulls was one of the few gems in this entire package. The characters are nothing burgers at this point, Neil drives me up a wall, and the experience is overall sloppy and needed more time in the oven to fully realize its ideas. But that's where things are going to take a turn. As many of you probably already know, when you complete the 5 main quests in IW, you unlock what's called Director's Cut. So let's see where this last bit of development time went towards. So strap in as we rewrite our experiences with Infinite Warfare Zombies Director's Cut mode.
Oh, man! Oh no. What have we done?
Come on, help! Somebody help!
You have served thy master well. Your death was merely the beginning.
Director's Cut is a mode I've gone up and down with a ton of times over the years. Originally, I felt it made you too powerful, then I thought it was a good addition, then I thought if you used it or had someone use it to help you, you cheated the Easter eggs and you cheated yourself out of the reward, and also how this relates to our society constantly giving handouts rather than having people actually perform hard work for their just rewards, and we as a people will crumble under our own weights. And then I remembered it's an absurd video game, and this just gives you more ways to play it. So let's talk about why it's one of the best rewards in the series, at an expensive cost. Director's Cut is unlocked after completing the 5 main quests and can be activated by interacting with the soul jar on just about any map. Funny enough, this cannot be done immediately after completing the Beast Egg, and the teleport to Pack-a-Punch is just straight up broken because life is a joke sometimes. Once activated and you return to the main menu, you now have access to Director's Cut by toggling this mode on and off. Director's Cut combines every bonus from each Ghosts and Skulls machine while adding other bonuses that make the experience unique. Loading into the map with Director's Cut grants you 25,000 points, every perk on the map, and Trailblazers on attack, double the amount of quick revive uses in solo, every gun in the box is Pack-a-Punch, including wonder weapons if there is an applicable upgrade, infinite fate and fortune card refills, double pap uses are always in pack, and the ability to recomplete the Easter egg and work towards a special final boss. This makes you insanely overpowered, and the game goes from a resource management action survival to an arcade shooter that rewards fun above all else. And I love this idea, but this isn't even the end of it. Every single time you recomplete an Easter egg in Director's Cut, you receive a talisman. This will mark your recompletion of the experience, and this must be performed on every subsequent map. So you'll have to refight the aliens in Spaceland with the upgraded Wonder Weapon pistols, melting them, Rave in the Redwoods, which honestly sees the least amount of changes besides the bows already being in the box, Shaolin, where your biggest benefit is being able to have the katana and nunchuck super early, Attack, which by golly is still the same map, with the Wonder Weapon that comes out of the box both completed and non-completed randomly, and Beast from Beyond, where the Venom X is in the box, and Cryptid rounds can more or less be avoided as you can have the power on and round 1 completed in less than a minute. Once you've recompleted the Mammoth fight and every previous Easter egg, you'll have access to an extended version of the Beast outro cutscene. But before you go, you return to the Afterlife arcade and prepare, where you can spin the mystery wheel for random double tap weapons, access to all perks if you don't have them already, and a refill of your Fate and Fortune cards. This is a cool room, but leaving your weaponry up to chance when you're about to fight a boss that has a clear and inconsistent win strategy is bonkers to me. Now, if only there was a wall of weapons that I could choose from, like a really cool boss fight mode that cuts out the middleman of the mystery wheel, because not only can only one person use it, it's random, but whatever. Once the time is up, it's revealed the demon Mephistopheles is actually behind these mysterious happenings, revealing to us he is the reason Willard has been luring people to the theater, so Mephistopheles can have their eternal souls. And now with Willard defeated, he has chosen our crew to be his new disciples, with the demonic overlord being the one who has been controlling him, and the one he tried to warn us about in the Beast outro. Okay, first of all, this explanation just sucks. Let's talk about it. As previously stated, I cannot understand for the life of me why the writers didn't make Willard just a villain of the week. This is a perfect setup, and Beast's conclusion would have wrapped up the story nicely, even giving us a catharsis as now Willard is doomed to die in his movies for eternity, kinda like William Afton's fate in Ultimate Custom Night. Instead, they chose to make him a sympathetic villain who flip-flops on whether or not he is truly evil through the various radios, side quests, and audio logs trying to hint at this inevitable conclusion. But none of it cohesively works, because the narrative wants to make this bait and switch you couldn't have seen coming. As stated previously, why not have a moment where Willard breaks free from Mephistopheles' control in a cutscene, and that's what tips us off to something being wrong. The bait and switch hardly makes any sense, and only seeks to further muddy the storyline, and this also doesn't help with the tone, which I feel like completely clashes with the fun, carefree nature the game tries to set up. Like, I just don't think I can see the Mephistopheles reveal and Willard's very dark backstory fitting in the same line as the Saturday morning intro the game had. And you know what, sure, you can have a not serious story with a not serious reveal. I'm not saying that's the issue, but I think that the reveal just kinda sucks. Anyways, the IW crew gets genied because they once told Pam they only wanted to return to the theater and not outside of the films, so Mephistopheles grants them their wish by returning them to a world that's the theater, which is fine I guess, and explains the theater we see in Beast as a world within a world kind of deal. Obviously, our crew don't go along with this, so Mephistopheles will consume their souls and make them obey his commands. This initiates a final boss sequence where you must face off against the most difficult and well-designed boss in the series. The fight Cortifex and the Forsaken wish they were. This will also be repeated much from my boss fights video, but who's keeping track? Go watch both. Mephistopheles is a 6-phase boss that grows in difficulty and lethality with each passing phase. To defeat the boss, players must stand on one of 5 sigils for 20 seconds and use the freed souls to weaken his barrier and damage him. While you're standing on the sigils, Mephistopheles will send a barrage of attacks out at you, most of which will instantly down you if they make contact with you. Once enough souls have been launched into him, you can shoot at the glowing symbols on his chest to initiate an intermediary phase, where you'll have to fight the evolving series of enemies that show up on Beast. Once survived, you just need to hide behind a pillar to avoid a meteor onslaught. This must then be repeated 5 times, with the final phase being where all hell breaks loose. Mephistopheles fires a large volley of meteors, summons a black hole, shoots fire across the lane, summons undead skeletons, creates a firewall that blocks off half the arena, sends a large meteor flying towards you, performs a grand slam, and summons a lethal fire tornado that covers a ton of the arena and is rather deadly. These attacks were designed to kill you, and if it wasn't for the game's boss fight mode, you'd have to complete the Beast from Beyond Easter egg every single time you wanted to reattempt this fight, which is why it took so long to learn and is honestly in line with how many round burners this step has. So instead of a round burner, it's an entire game burner. The first intermediary phase has players fight against undead, scouts, phantoms, and the clowns from Spaceland. The second phase switches out the clowns for the slasher, the third ninjas, and the fourth a horde of cryptids alongside 2 blue rhinos, which is insane, and a common place to take it down. But all these factors come to a head in the final phase, where you no longer need to stand on any sigils, and instead just shoot the boss while avoiding his attacks, and every enemy previously stated. This final phase is where the boss fight kinda crumbles under its own weight. But if I'm being honest, it's an absolute blast, and every death makes you want to try it again and get better. At least I think it does. Once you deal enough damage, you'll simply need to interact with the raised talisman, which stuns Mephistopheles one last time. Now all you need to do is open fire, and Mephistopheles is defeated as he blows up. This leads to the second final cutscene, where our beaten and battered crew escape the demon's clutches.
We got it! Open fire!
Only to remain trapped in the theater, showing us that it's a world trapped within a world trapped within the soul jar on Willard's desk. And thus the story ends. Or does it? Having beaten Mephistopheles, you can now unlock and play as Willard Wyler in Zombies in Spaceland in Director's Cut mode, thus giving even more content to an already content-rich map. This change comes with new quotes and interactions between Willard and Hasselhoff. The Hoff becomes the announcer, and you get access to a special dagger Willard uses in the Zombies in Spaceland intro cutscene. There are some conflicting reports online, but as far as I can tell, the dagger one-shots well into the 30s and 40s with Slappy Taffy. Once you complete Zombies in Spaceland for a third time, you'll be rewarded with a third and final outro cutscene. Having easily escaped Spaceland, and for some reason not the other maps, Willard expresses why it's important for the IW crew to be hand-picked, and how there is much work to do before ending and transitioning to the credits.
Who makes these films? The moment I said I you'll never work in this town again! Willard! Now do you understand? This is why I chose each of you. There is much to do. Shall we begin?
And with that, it's over. It's finally over! I've covered nearly all of IW Zombies! So, how long is this video? Oh yeah, that's a long time. Okay, let's summarize and talk about it. Director's Cut is an absolutely fantastic reward, and one of the best we've received in the series. It incentivizes you to replay these maps, with easily some of the strongest replay value we've seen in the series, and has a fantastical final boss that perfectly caps off the game on a high note, and is probably why the game has such a strong following nowadays. The mode allows you to experiment like never before, while also placing a band-aid atop the terrible collision, hit detections, and iframe systems by just simply making the game easier. It also incentivizes you to help other players by giving you a large XP bonus for each person you help, and overall, there's just more content. I have no idea whatever young Stanley was thinking, but he really needed to get off his high horse. This mode is such a good addition and, you know, rewards players. Despite the road it took to get here, I've come to appreciate Director's Cut so much more in the process of this review, which is something I could say for the entirety of this game as a whole. But now let's address the elephant in the room with this mode. Lee Ross has gone on record stating that Director's Cut is both part of and took up the already limited development time of The Beast from Beyond. Now, do I believe that Beast could have been improved if the development time had gone towards it? Yes. But to play devil's advocate, The Beast from Beyond needs an entire overhaul, not just the bugs and poor gameplay decisions. So at the same time, I get it, but honestly, they did make the right call by making Director's Cut so good and not polishing up Beast. There's a part of me that understands the sacrifice, but then there's another part of me that thinks it's stupid to let Beast fall to the wayside. I'm not paying $15 hard-earned dollars for Director's Cut. I'm paying for Beast as a package, and as a package, I think it is a real letdown. This was prioritized over Beast, despite it being obvious no amount of extra development time could have saved it. I don't know, it's always something that's rubbed me the wrong way, like saying that a portion of this experience is more important than the other, but that's just me. At the end of the day, Director's Cut is an amazing mode that exists in such a polished state due to throwing Beast to the wayside, even if that time spent on it wouldn't really help. But when Beast is still in such a broken state to this day, it makes me raise an eyebrow or two. But this reward is the one I believe the developer should always strive and reach for. Just not the part where they released the worst experience in the series, because, you know, that is part of it too. But before we wrap things up, we still have a few more things left to talk about.
The end?
The first bonus was boss fight mode. Following the release of Beasts from Beyond, the game kept on giving with its final main content update came boss fight mode. With access to nearly every weapon on a specific map, every perk, and 20k points, you're simply tasked with completing the fight as quick as possible, and comparing your times with others. But honestly, this mode is perfect for practicing the boss fights before attempting the main quest, especially Shaolin Shuffle and Mephistopheles, which require long commitments, and in Mephistopheles' case, you'll go through the effort to complete Beast just to immediately die to Meth. So this mode is a great way to practice and learn the fight without having to complete Beast in Director's Cut every single time you wanted to try it. I love this mode, and if possible, should have been a staple in every game going forward. BO4 would have benefited from this so much. But then there's some criticisms. Because of the 20k limit, you can't get properly set up the way you want to, which is fair, but I would like a version that gives you infinite points and a version that gives you 20k limit, because in solo you have enough for a Wonder Weapon and or the Kendalls, your preferred LMG, and the core 5 perks, which is fine, but you have just few too little points to properly experiment with different more expensive options, but that's just me. But this is such a cool mode, and arguably way more replayable than something like Gauntlets, Rush, or Crank, that's for sure. And finally, before we get into our conclusion, let's cover anything that I forgot about from my previous reviews, which includes fun facts, small features, or any little anecdotes I remembered. If it's not mentioned here, it's never getting talked about again. The axe on Spaceland is cool, and is a really solid high round melee option, but can only be obtained from the box. Needing to complete the Easter egg for Spaceland Ghosts and Skulls is stupid. It's weird how Kevin Smith on Rave gets the most to do in terms of the game's lore. In Shaolin Shuffle, there's the Purple Panther side Easter egg. If you max out your Chi ability, you can find special Purple Panther symbols around the map when you activate your Chi ability. By interacting with them, you gain one of 3 new special abilities that replaces your left bumper attack. There's the Hand Wave, the Air Pistol, and the Squeeze. Each of these abilities have some poor hit detection, and sometimes they just flat out don't even work. Or at least it's awkward how it works, but they were most likely done in an afternoon, and are honestly so charming, you really can't be mad at them. It's just extra silly little content, and I love it for that. In most of the maps you can find photos of the development team, especially Lee Ross. Although I haven't found him on Attack and Beast, if there are photos of him. In Director's Cut, you can unlock bonus lobby music by tracking down and finding various masks on each of the maps in Director's Cut on round 1. These tracks are the 12 different perk jingles from across the game. And then there's the balancing of the salvage system. As discussed all the way back in part 1, the salvage system and the weapon variants are not balanced, with the Mauler Sentinel variant being the most overpowered weapon in Zombies history, but it can only be unlocked by completing weekly quests or paying for supply drops. And if you want to have an easier time battling the Mammoths or Mephistopheles, it's highly recommended you have weapons like the Mauler Sentinel or the EBR Bomber. And if you don't, you're forced to deal with a much more difficult and intense fight. And sadly, it feels like Mephistopheles was balanced around this weapon, which is a shame as the only way to get it out of game is through grinding, and then in game you have to spin an RNG weapon wheel before the boss fight itself. Then there's the beautiful red lighting whenever the undead appear from out of the ground. I don't know why, it just looks so gorgeous, especially on Spaceland, where the one color the map doesn't have is reds, so it sticks out in a good way. In Attack of the Radioactive Thing, soldier zombies produce a skull effect when they die. This is the exact same effect that plays when you kill a zombie in Rave mode. But did you know the developers had more plans for the franchise? On Twitter, Lee Ross has come out and shared his plans with what they intended to do to follow up the cliffhanger at the end of Beasts from Beyond. So let's take a look at it, shall we? Now, I haven't found the original post, but I have a tweet following up on his original post, which stated that Lee Ross intended to roll the entire Treyarch universe into IW as a bunch of Willard Wyler films in the same way Extinction was done in Beast. But granted, after reading that tweet, I can't tell if he's joking or not. But with that said, that's everything in IW Zombies. If I forgot something, I guess that's just no longer my problem. But how does the game feel overall as a complete package? Wait, I'm sure to talk about this. So the laser cannons you shoot Krogzilla with in the attack boss fight are actually in the cutscene flat cannons, which would have been period accurate. These flat cannons would have been used to attack Krogzilla and were most likely replaced as they had the animation for the laser cannons from campaign. Wait, where are you guys going? Okay, I can tell you guys about the Krog egg drops if you have the venom. No, this can't be the end. There's still 8 more hours of analysis left. Infinite Warfare Zombies is a game I'm incredibly indecisive about. Let's start the conclusion with the good. The developers who made this game were extremely passionate and talented, and you can see said talent oozing out of every single ounce of this game. From the visuals, to the gameplay, to the interviews Lee Ross did and how highly he speaks of his creation on Twitter, it's hard not to feel the infectious positivity from this man and his team. He must brighten a room wherever he goes. Zombies in Spaceland is arguably the best launch experience we've ever received and easily ranks in the top 10 for best maps due to his creativity, level of freedom, and customization, and having an overall high fun factor that caters to all types of players. Rave in the Redwoods is an extremely solid follow-up that takes the foundation that Zombies in Spaceland started and continues to build on top of it, featuring a strong setting and an unforgettable rave vision mode, but it's a shame the slasher is such a blemish on an otherwise perfect sequel. Shaolin Shuffle is where things get messy, but the map goes on building on the themes and style continued by Rave and features some impeccable art design and theming. The wonder weapons are some of the game's most unique, and the map benefits from the style IW Zombies is going for. But the map is killed by the ninja zombies and creating a main quest that caters towards the hunt first and the enjoyment second, creating an Easter egg that is long and tedious for all the wrong reasons, and the map is borderline unplayable past round 20 if you don't indulge in the dominant strategy, which hurts player creativity. Attack is a fine map that begins to buckle under the weight of an identity crisis that the game is having. Does it want to do its own thing, or does it want to recapture the audience that wasn't overall happy with it when IW was coming out? And Attack is the fruits of that labor. The map is alright, but feels as though it's going through the motions, trying to replicate a style of map that it isn't. And the Easter egg can be rather insulting, missing the point of what makes a difficult Easter egg step fun, and just becomes a tedious snorefest that again values the hunt over the actual enjoyment of the quest. And the Krogs are arguably the most memorable part of the experience, despite them being reskinned cryptids. And finally, there's the Beast from Beyond, which is often considered the worst map in the series due to its rushed development cycle and poor gameplay and design decisions like the Shaolin Ninja Zombies and the poorly thought out cryptid rounds. Overall, the map is simply messy, and seemingly obvious bugs still exist to this day. Then there's the Ghosts and Skulls questlines. As a side Easter egg, I respect the difficulty and hardcore dedication to providing players with more in-depth additional content, aside from just the main quest. But the way these quests are presented and executed remains a messy topic we've had to individually discuss with each map we've reviewed. I really do think Ghosts and Skulls is super interesting as an idea and concept, but needs way more refinement in its execution. Gameplay in IW is aggressive and incentivizes players to always be on the front lines, taking down undead when they appear, with the game's more aggressive and dangerous special enemies commanding your attention as they'll hunt you down in seconds if you're not paying attention. And this is most true in Shaolin and Beast. Then there's the game's AI collision and hitboxes, which completely destroy your movement. There are no iframes or defensive options like the shield, leading to more unfair downs even for experienced players. The boss fights range wildly from some of the worst to one of the best, and this lack of consistent quality almost poetically reflects the entire game. The game's Director's Cut mode is a labor of love for fans who stuck with IW, but it comes at the cost of Beasts from Beyond. The celebrities were a feature I wasn't a big fan of when I first played the game, but they grew on me by the end of the experience, with Paul Rubens being an absolute standout among the cast. And getting to play as them is such a good feature. Like, let me unlock and play as the High Priest of Chaos Treyarch. Give us cool rewards, cause in IW, they have cool rewards, and that is something that I feel I cannot understate enough that this game does, and something that should be highly praised for each of the developers who put in this cool stuff, like unique wonder weapons, character skins, director's cut, Mephistopheles, and of course the third outro for Spaceland. Boss fight mode is a blast, and should have been a standard in every game going forward. The narrative starts out with simplistic star power, but soon devolves into a disappointing copy of its compatriots, seemingly missing the point of its own premise and theming. But with all that said, I think I've finally come around and can confidently say I really enjoyed IW Zombies. But it should be recognized that for every good idea the game has, there is one that is equally as terrible, and it should be noted that sometimes passion and love doesn't always translate into execution and success. The game starts off with one of the strongest hands in the franchise, but through a continuing season of mixed bags and blunders, crumbles under its own weight, with the rewards barely saving it at the last possible moment. But I can't express how happy I am that I went back through this undead entry, no matter how many ups and downs I faced. I truly cannot recommend IW enough. At least the good parts of it. And maybe get someone to just carry you through the eggs, as even the developers admit that's part of the fun. But I had an absolute blast going through and dissecting every little minute detail of this game. But I do have to admit, I'm pretty happy I'm done with it. And thus ends our IW Zombies Rereview. This video series has taken up basically a year of my life, but I legitimately could not be happier I embarked on this endeavor. With all sincerity, thank you everyone so much for watching. Each and every one of you is the reason why I make these videos. And if you made it this far, let me know what your favorite IW map is. And for those of you who have thrown this video on the background and you've never played IW or zombies in general, let me know what your thoughts are from an outsider's perspective. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you like this video, I can't recommend enough my other reviews of AW, my original and now officially outdated review of IW Zombies, World War II Zombies, Cold War Zombies, and my review of the map 9. And if that's not your cup of tea, I've got a boss fights video I fell in love with making. And there's also an extremely entertaining podcast I made with John Rizzo where we attempt to talk about IW zombies, but get consistently sidetracked along the way. And who could forget the cut content video? As for the future, just know this train never stops. And up next, I can confidently say we'll be looking into even more of Willard's catalog with the Neversoft creation, Extinction. And thank you Last Gen for all the wonderful renders that you've all been seeing throughout this series. Go follow him on Twitter, he deserves it. And thank you so much to Legitimate Gamer for making the main thumbnail that you're all seeing on the main video. But one last time, thank you everyone for watching. And remember, keep on slaying. And cut! Finally, I'm gonna take a nap.